Most cold email advice you're hearing right now is complete BS. And I'm not saying that to be provocative. I'm saying it because I've set up over 250,000 inboxes for cold email, and I've watched thousands of campaigns fail for reasons that, quite frankly, nobody wants to talk about. And the reality right now is that if your infrastructure isn't right, up to 75% of your outreach is landing in spam, which means your emails are effectively invisible. And yet, everyone still obsesses over their copy, or change the subject line, add more personalization, or try this new AI tool. But what does that actually matter if nobody is reading it to begin with? So in this video, I'm breaking down the fundamentals that you need to nail if you want to book meetings and print money with cold email in 2026. So let's dive in. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that your deliverability is 10 times more important than your copy. You can write the most persuasive, compelling email ever, but if your Gmail or Outlook flags your domain, you're not going to sign any clients. Yet most people still spend weeks perfecting their copy, front-loading all of their work, while their emails land in spam folders. I've literally seen campaigns with perfect copy, great leads, completely ruined because they didn't take the infrastructure seriously enough. And it's always invisible at first. Spam doesn't raise a big flag or send you an email to tell your emails aren't landing. Your reply rates just slowly go down over time. I could tell you countless stories of where we've seen clients come to us and they've had poor authentication on their infrastructure. They've just had farmed accounts. They've used cracked accounts. They've had non-authentic infrastructure by what they thought was a trusted reseller. So let me show you what a proper cold email infrastructure actually looks like. And this is all based on the data that we get from setting up infrastructure for hundreds of thousands of senders. And then also taking and tracking meticulous data around what works and what doesn't. So first things first, you should use official Google Workspace or Microsoft 365 accounts. As I mentioned before, not cracked or farmed accounts. This matters because cracked accounts get flagged and shut down randomly and quickly. When we talk about cracked accounts, we're talking about a non-legitimate way of obtaining a license for a certain provider. And farmed accounts, they have a bad sending history. You take that on when you buy it, and a farmed account essentially is recycled licenses that improve the P&L of the supplier. Whereas official accounts come authenticated and with a clean reputation. Google and Microsoft can tell the difference, and they treat unofficial accounts as super high risk. You should also use .com domains from reputable registrars like Porkbun, Namecheap, and GoDaddy. You can forward these through to places like Cloudflare for extra security, but if you have weird TLDs like .xyz or .info, these are also more likely to get flagged and come with a greater risk. We have personally run countless tests to test the TLD theory of if we can use cheaper domain styles to get the same sending quality. And we have data around this to show that the burnout time of the infrastructure is 3 times faster. A .info domain will typically be finished within 3 weeks of sending. Now, if you're okay with the operational headache of actually rotating those, then it's perfectly viable. But for most people who want a simple set and forget infrastructure, this is just not the route that you should go down. Now, on the topic of domains, you should also limit yourself to 2 to 3 inboxes per domain maximum. And the reason for this is if one inbox gets flagged, it can poison the whole domain. So the more inboxes you have on one domain, the more risk you're concentrating in one place. It's simple risk diversification. When you're spreading across multiple domains with fewer inboxes each, it means one problem doesn't cause you a much bigger problem and ruin your entire outreach campaign. Next, you want US-based IPs for better reputation. Mailbox providers track where your emails are coming from. So if you have offshore IPs, these are often associated with spammers, even if you're not. Whereas the US IPs generally have a cleaner history, and that's because there's more oversight and understanding about them. Make sure you're diversifying though, across Google and Microsoft when setting up your emails. Definitely do not put your entire outreach at the mercy of one provider. This is because if Google tightens their filters tomorrow, for example, you've still got Microsoft Outreach running. We saw this last year in 2025, and we also saw it in 2024, where Google have tightened some security filters, whether directly or indirectly meaning to, and we've seen people have their entire infrastructure wiped out. Now, when we look at domain setup, authentication, this is absolutely non-negotiable. SPF, DKIM, DMARC, and MX records, they all have to be green before you send a single email. If any of these are misconfigured, you're basically waving a big banner at Gmail or Outlook saying I might be a spammer, and they will definitely treat you like one. You can always double check this on a tool like MX Toolbox, which is completely free and will give you that peace of mind. By the way, if you want to skip the headache of setting all of this up yourself, we can handle the entire infrastructure setup for you. Official Google and Microsoft accounts, full DNS configuration, absolutely everything. You can click the link in the description to learn more, but back to the video. Now, when we look at list building, your infrastructure is dialed in. Now, who are you actually going to be emailing? Who are you targeting? And this is another area where a lot of people go wrong yet again. They grab a massive list from Apollo, they filter by a job title, and they blast 10,000 people. But this doesn't work anymore. This is an old legacy style of outreach. These days, it's all about intent-based signaling. I'd rather build a 100-person list based on buying signals than blast 10,000 broad leads at one time. And the questions change from who has the right job title to who actually has a reason to care right now. So where do you find these intent signals? And these can be companies that have got recent funding because they have cash and urgency to spend it, or companies that are rapidly hiring because they're scaling fast and likely have gaps you can fill. You can also look for individuals who have recently been promoted because they always want to have the quick wins to prove themselves. There's lots of other signals that you can use too, like product launches or industry events and webinars. In terms of the tools of how you can find them, here's what I would personally recommend. I'd start with Apollo for building your initial list. It's got a massive database for filtering and a solid for finding businesses in most industries. Then what I'll do is I'll like to cross-reference with LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and this will check for recent job changes or if they're actively hiring, and these are your intent signals. If you want to go more advanced, tools like Clay allow you to build custom workflows and layer in AI filters to find even more specific triggers. What we do internally is we don't actually start with Apollo, we start with Sales Navigator as our primary, and then we will go through and we'll enrich it and extract through Apify, use data validation and verification through ICPs, and then we'll use Reun for email verification and then upload to Sequencer. So this is the first type of enrichment and lead building process that we go through internally to get super high intent signal-based ICP outreach. And what we're doing here is we're looking at industry personas that we see as influencers that commonly post on LinkedIn and cause high conversation with our desired buyers. The first tool we use is Triggerfy, and this is to monitor high signal LinkedIn posts. It will pull commenters' LinkedIn URLs, and it will allow us to actually export that information of the people commenting in those environments we see as valuable. Next, we're going to push this into ICPs, and this is going to allow us to enrich LinkedIn profiles with their work emails. We can then retrieve their job titles as well to allow us to do outreach personalization. The final step of this super simple process is uploading them to our sequencer. So SmartLead, Instantly, Lemlist, Bison, whatever platform you're on. And then we ensure that we have contacted them within 24 hours. And we do this cold outreach at scale, obviously. And this is then going to give us a super high intent potential buyer based on something relevant that they have just commented. And that's the first way that we do things. So the second type of targeting that we do, and that I'm going to talk about now, is tech stack targeting. And this is again another type of waterfall enrichment process. And what we're looking to do here is identify prospects and buyers that already use technologies that we know that we can either A, integrate with, or B, indicates that they potentially have a good use of our product. So the first thing is we use Built With inside of Clay to identify if they use Shopify, WordPress, HubSpot, Google, any kind of outreach technologies or whatever it might be relevant for yourself. Then we'll go to enrich the contacts. So we'll fetch verified emails and job titles within Apollo. Secondary to Apollo, if it's missing data, we will fall back to ICPs if it's required. The next step is segmentation of leads. So what we'll be doing here is categorizing the leads based on the detected tech stack. So we're bucketing people based on the tools that they use so that we can have hyper-specific outreach and problem points for that particular tech tool. So for example, if you already are a Gmail customer, you'd be a great ICP for us to target based on cost saving. If you're using HubSpot for outreach and you have the sales functions, you're a great prospect for us to contact because we can probably save you money on your infrastructure for outreach and potentially enrich you with some of our resources and tools to achieve it better. The fourth step of this is to push it to the sequencer. So we're going to be sending personalized cold emails via SmartLead, Instantly, Lemlist, Bison, all the same as normal, but we're going to have sequences specifically set up for each type of tech that is being used. So those buckets that we did in the segmentation, they're going to be each type of sequence that we're running. And that's the tech stack targeting approach that we use. Now, once you've got your leads, you need a system for managing them because quite frankly, not every lead deserves the same treatment. And I use what I call the 4-tier system. We'll be looking at criteria such as recency, the engagement history, email validity, and then the overall confidence we have for the client. When I look at this, I'm determining how likely a customer is or how likely a prospect is to buy, and this is my categorization. So it might be the recency of the intent signal. It might be they're newly hired. It might be the new funding, and these are going to be the highest priority for me. They might work down all the way to tier 4 or tier D leads, depending on which system you want to use, which is going to be things that are more loosely based on where we can see engagement. Tier A is your engaged leads. These get the highest priority, the most personalization, and you send from your best domains. Tier B, this is lukewarm leads. They get your standard sequences on solid infrastructure. Tier C, this is old leads. These need re-engagement campaigns and more careful sending. We're looking to reactivate these guys. And Tier D, this is the reputation risk. As I said, this is people who haven't engaged in ages or contacts you're unsure about. And you can make a choice. Either you can nurture them back through the pipeline or you can remove them entirely. The choice is yours. Now, the key is adjusting your sending frequency and volume based on which tier they are in. Blasting tier D leads the same way that you email tier A leads is how you end up with burnt domains. And before you send anything, you need to clean your list. It is an absolute non-negotiable. I use Million Verifier or Reune to verify every list before it goes out. And you should aim for a bounce rate of under 1.5%. If your bounce rate gets too high, your ESP is actually going to flag your account as a potential spammer. And once that happens, they start throttling your sends and routing you straight to spam. It's then going to take you around 3 to 6 months to rebuild that trust. So you have to be very, very careful here. Think about it this way. List cleaning costs you maybe $200. If you skip it and your bounce rates spike, your domain gets flagged, and now you've got no pipeline for months while you try to recover this. One founder I know personally actually delayed his list cleaning for budget reasons and didn't see it as an important cost, and ended up losing a $50,000 deal to a competitor whose emails actually landed. So this isn't optional. It's just the cost of doing cold email properly. So now let's talk about how we can actually start sending emails. The first thing I need to mention is the warm-up process, because you can't start sending at full volume on a new domain. Most people, on their first time round at this, end up sabotaging their warm-up without realizing it. They finish the 14-day period, they launch with completely different sending behavior, completely new segment, completely new copy style, new volume all at once. But trust doesn't transfer like that. It's not like for like. And this is what I found to be the best warm-up protocol to be. So after testing different warm-up strategies across hundreds of thousands of inboxes, what we personally use internally is 8 emails per day, 2 daily ramp up, a 1-to-8 randomization, and a 60% reply rate. And we will typically run that for 14 days to be safe, and anything else that we're not using straight away, we will keep in that same process. And we dial this in monthly and even weekly based on the feedback data that we see from all of our customers. When we look at how long it takes to build trust with an email account, with a domain, we're typically looking at 14 days being the minimum viable amount. We see people try and rush this process, and then they wonder and sit and scratch their heads as to why their email accounts are burnt after 4 weeks, or wonder why they're not getting the reply rates that they're getting maybe in a separate campaign where everything's the same, but they've just changed their warm-up. Don't be confused. You don't need to worry about having a completely private warm-up pool and this isolated batch of this or that and paying premiums for it. The warm-up pools that you get within Instantly or SmartLead are perfectly fine. Just follow the process properly. As I say, you need a minimum of a 14-day ramp-up where you're sending from 5 to 8 emails per day, and you're gradually increasing to 10 to 15 per day. When you're sending emails, it should be in random windows and have delays in between because it reflects actual human behavior. Nobody is pumping emails out every 2 minutes round the clock. You need to importantly have reply simulation turned on. And this is where your warm-up tool sends emails between your inboxes and other inboxes in their network, and those emails actually get opened, they get replied to, and they marked as important. And this trains Google and Outlook to see your inbox as legitimate because it's having real back and forth conversations, not just blasting out one-way messages. Finally, most warm-up tools give you a score based on how your emails are performing. Things like whether they're landing in the inbox versus spam, open rates, reply rates. Typically, if that score drops below 70%, pause the campaign or the warm-up straight away and figure out what's going wrong before you do any more damage. Now, let's talk about what actually takes to write a cold email. The best cold emails don't sound like a sales pitch or a job interview. They sound like a text message from someone you'd actually want to hear from. And I implement what I call the no fluff framework. Have one problem where you cut out their specific pain, and then one proof point where you share quick social proof in a sentence or two, and then one question. A soft CTA that's very easy to respond to. And that's it. 80 words max. Anything longer is probably getting deleted. And to be honest, there are some things you need to avoid in your first email. You shouldn't have links. These kill your deliverability. And you need to avoid having any attachments or pitch decks because nobody is opening those from a stranger. Let's be realistic. Definitely do not have any tracking pixels in the email or Calendly link. Quite frankly, you've just not earned that yet. You've not earned that trust. And finally, make sure you have no marketing language, like this is a limited time offer or exclusive offer, or it's game changing. Because if it sounds like a promo, guess what? It gets filtered like a promo. So let's look at your CTA. Let's keep it low pressure. The goal of the first email isn't to book a meeting. It's just to start a conversation and get a reply. So your CTA should make it easy for them to respond without committing to anything. There's a few different approaches that work, and you can ask a simple yes/no question like relevant, or already have someone handling this. Or what you can do is you can offer to send something valuable, like, can I send a quick loom on this? Or would you hate me if I sent a case study? The approach you pick doesn't matter all that much, as long as it's super low pressure, low stakes, and you're not asking for 30 minutes of their time. You're just asking if they want to keep talking and if the problem's relevant. Now, here's something many people don't realize. You actually need to send more than one email. Most of your replies won't come from one email. They'll come from the third, the fourth, or maybe even the fifth message in your sequence. And this is because your prospect inbox is filled with other pitches. There's 100 other people like you. They're not ignoring you, they just didn't see it. So if you stop after email 1 or 2, you've basically wasted your own time. I personally recommend sending 5 emails. Email 1 is your initial outreach, using the no fluff framework I've just walked you through. Next, email 2. This is a reminder, but you're also going to add some value to, like a case study or a new insight. And then email 3 is asking for feedback. Something like, not sure if this was just off base or just bad timing. Email 4 adds light scarcity, like I still have a couple of spots this week if it's relevant. And finally, email 5 is the breakup email. No worries, if now's not the right time, feel free to reach out if things change. Now, what I've given you here is the overview. And there's obviously a ton more that goes into running cold email that actually lands in inboxes and helps you sign clients. So if you are serious about booking more meetings, you don't want the headache of setting up infrastructure yourself, check out Premium Inboxes using the first link in the description. All you will need to do is fill out a 2-minute form with your domain preferences, and then we will handle everything else for you. As I said, it's official Google and Microsoft accounts, DNS fully configured and ready to go. We even upload them directly into your sequencer so you can start sending straight away. Everything we do is based on what you've seen work across 250,000 inboxes. So you're getting the exact setup that gives you the best chance of landing in the primary inbox without figuring it out yourself. So again, click the link in the description, get your inboxes set up, and if you want to see more on Crush It with Cold Email today, then watch this one next.